When you first hear the general premise of Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, 3 girls in a club make an anime, it sounds a lot like other slice-of-life shows. But just by watching the opening scene of the first episode, you can see there's a lot more behind the surface. It begins as we follow alongside a young Asakusa, one of the show's 3 main characters, as she explores the foreign world of Shibahama, a fictional futuristic city brimming with bizarre yet stunning solar punk architecture that immediately commands her and the viewer's whole attention. She whips out a sketchbook and begins to draw anything and everything that catches her eye. And as she draws, we're sucked into her world of imagination where all of her drawings come to life. Everything in this section, from the hand-drawn visuals to the sound effects that come straight from Asakusa's imagination, feel bathed in a nostalgic fondness for childhood creativity. After our brief exploration, we're ripped out of that world to see Asakusa sit down and watch Future Boy Conan, one of the first series that Hayao Miyazaki ever directed. The beautiful animations transfix her, and we get to see the very moment she falls in love with animation. Then we hard cut to... This intro nearly gave me whiplash the first time I saw it. This bright, bizarre sequence hit me in the face like a fistful of roses, and I realized I was hooked. I first watched Eizouken during a 2020 school day. I, like a lot of students, spent the year stuck at home on a muted Zoom call, and instead of watching my elderly teacher fumble with the controls, I spent my days doom scrolling YouTube. One of those days, a trailer for Eizouken popped into my recommended, and I thought, why not? So I started the first episode, and without realizing it, I had watched all 12 in a single day. I loved this show on my first watch. Not only was it a fun escape from being stuck inside all day, but it also helped me shape my current understanding of creating and creativity, as well as their potential to become negatives. I followed along every step of the 3 girls, Asakusa, Mizusaki, and Kanamori's journey to create, so much so that I even forgot to leave my Zoom class, which I only realized later that night when I was shutting my computer down. The show really gets into the creative mindset from the jump with the first arc. After coming up with the idea for the film club as a cover for them to make anime, the girls are now tasked with actually producing their first ever short. A short that needs to be good enough to get the student council, who they're already on bad footing with, to approve their funding and promote them to actual club status. On top of that, they only have 50 days to finish it. At first, that kind of sounds like a lot, but Mizusaki wants it to be almost completely hand-drawn, and with only one main animator, they're in for a long ride. We followed the girls through each step of their creative cycle. We see them go from brainstorming to getting production started to even their procrastination, each section furthering our understanding of their mindset. Each girl is so distinct from one another, with their designs, personalities, and even the ways they go about creating being wholly their own, allowing these 3 girls from wildly different backgrounds to come together to create something completely unique. Asakusa, who we talked a bit about earlier, is a small, shy country bumpkin and also the lead world designer and director for the club. She finds her inspiration through the environments and world around her, making a lot of their fictional worlds feel much more real. Mizusaki is a model and daughter of 2 superstar actors who fell in love with animation after seeing and wanting to capture the physicality of real-world movement, which started with seeing her grandma toss tea in a unique way when she was a little kid. She's the club's lead character designer and animator, giving a lot more personality to their works. Lastly is Kanamori, a tall, serious, money-driven person who actually serves as the real backbone of the club. She's able to get the things they need for animation while also making sure the other 2 finish their work on time. She's been obsessed with business management ever since she was a kid, being motivated to get good at it after seeing her uncle's business close down due to a mix of perfectionism, poor management, and bad timing. These 3 characters mesh together to create the true feeling of unrestricted creativity, which makes each and every scene super fun and engaging to watch. The show goes from funny to sweet to even educational all in the span of a single episode, which really helped invest me into this world right alongside the characters. This first arc is also where we can see a lot of the love and passion Studio Saru sunk into this show. Eizouken feels like one of those manga that were destined to become an anime, and Studio Saru fully understood that. They transformed every scene into something cool and interesting to look at. They add a lot to the scenes where the girls are just coming up with their ideas, fleshing out what were just concepts in the manga. Take this scene from episode 1, where Studio Saru transforms what was a fun scene in the manga, where the girls create a dragonfly contraption, to a chase scene with aerial combat that ends with a stunning escape into a beautiful view. They also put a lot into expanding our understanding of the characters. They were the ones who gave Mizusaki the backstory with her grandmother and transformed the girls into actual friends instead of just being strictly co-workers like they were in the manga. As the arc continues, we see the culmination of the passion built up in the characters come into reality. The girls put everything they can into the short, even working overnight at the school to finish the production in time. And as the morning of the final day starts, Kanamori and Asakusa have a short chat that ends up being one of the most impactful moments in the entire show.
それで終わったんですか?
終わるとか完成するとかではなく、魂を込めた妥協と諦めの結石が出る。
While you kind of get it from that line, the manga has a slight variation on it which makes it land so much harder. It's not about being done or complete. We'll produce a kidney stone from the compromise and resignation we poured our souls into. And that's really what this show is all about. When you create something you love and care about, you'll never be fully satisfied. But you have to know when to call it, when to pass the kidney stone. That final act of letting go being the most impactful act of love that you can do for both yourself and your work. And that truth applies to everything creative, from making anime to music to even just simple YouTube videos. I first learned this truth during the latter half of 2020. It was around that time I started taking editing more seriously, and what was once a fun but kind of one-note hobby for me actually blossomed into something I really love. That love led me to make my first actual YouTube video, and it had felt so wildly different than anything that had come before. I spent weeks researching and editing the video, and the more time went on, the more it became a part of me. Every hour I sunk into it only made me more willing to change and improve it, but after a month of work, it began to eat away at my social and family life until I finally gave in and released it onto YouTube. Looking back now, that video has its fair share of flaws, but I still look back on it and its creation with fondness and love. But there is one aspect of creating that the show doesn't really touch on enough. In that same scene where Saksa says the line about kidney stones, she was woken up from sleeping under her computer desk, where she tells Kanamori that she was pretending to be a pro. While this is basically a throwaway line, if we look more into what Asaksa is saying, we can start to see the hidden exploitation that keeps the anime industry running. Most workers at major studios are very overworked and underpaid, but to stay in the industry they love, they have to stay that way. Many major anime companies use underpaid freelancers for in-between frames, which make up a majority of each episode, paying them as little as 200 yen, which is currently around $1.30 USD per drawing. Horror stories from the anime industry have been posted online by people who worked on anime like Jujutsu Kaisen and Attack on Titan. One freelancer posted that Studio Mappa is like a factory with animators being forced to work on corrections instead of furthering their shows due to the employees being spread so thin. Even going back to the throwaway line from Asaksa, the act of animators sleeping under their desks due to overwork is explicitly mentioned in the 2019 Vox article about the dark side of the anime industry written by Eric Margolis. These conditions lead a lot of people who loved animating before joining the industry to be severely burnt out from it. Take the animator Shingo Tamagawa for example. Similar to Asaksa, Tamagawa loved drawing since he was a little kid and had wanted to become an animator since high school, being inspired by greats like Miyazaki and Anno. After years of hard work and schooling, he finally made it to his dream job, but once he was in the anime industry, that creeping feeling of burnout started to rear its head. 5 years into his career, he realized that feeling had caught up with him, so much so that if he stayed in the industry, he'd soon hate drawing itself. He decided to quit, and for the following year and a half, he couldn't draw anything at all. This feeling of burnout isn't just limited to the anime industry though. In any creative field, the feeling is bound to catch up with you if you push yourself too hard. We're even starting to see some of the effects here on YouTube, with some of the platform's biggest creators like MatPat, Tom Scott, and even Germa stepping back and retiring, burnt out from years of work to please their audiences and the algorithm, ready to move on with their lives. That doesn't even include the lesser effects burnout has on other creators, with many people reporting that overworking on videos ends up being severely toxic to their mental health. I've even felt those effects firsthand. After my first video, I started to veer away from labors of love for videos that were more financially viable. I became an editor for other people. I worked in that field for over a year, and at first, it seemed fine. Then, I started to lose that feeling of reluctance for calling videos done. I no longer had to pass a kidney stone with every video, and that hurt more than calling them done ever did. The thing I loved since middle school had become a job that left a bitter taste in my mouth. I realized I had to quit, or I might quit editing and creating for good. I started taking fewer and fewer jobs, and for most of 2023, I didn't edit anything at all. But, as you can tell from this video's existence, burnout isn't the end of the road. Let's go back to Shingo Tamagawa for a minute. After his year-and-a-half-long break from drawing, he started to get a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. A feeling which commanded him to make something of his own. So, he dedicated the next 3 years of his life to creating and working on that project, which would go on to be known as Puparia. The love and care it poured into every single frame seeps into the viewer as they watch, swept up in the beautifully intoxicating colors and fluid animation. In a behind-the-scenes documentary made by Archipel, Tawagama ends his discussion of creating Puparia with a quote,
僕はなんか見たことないものがとか感じたことのない感覚みたいなものを感じたくてアニメを作っているので、やっぱりそういった喜びみたいなものをみんな持ってると思うんですけど、全体としてそういう流れがもうちょっとできると日本のアニメもっと楽しくなりそうだなっていうのはちょっと思いますね。
And that joy is what brings us back to Eizouken. The show captures that feeling Tamagawa longed for nearly perfectly. That whole first arc is dedicated to showing off their sincere love and joy for creation, that feeling radiating through every scene. The arc finally ends as the girls present their budget and work to the student council, who already see them as nuisances for some of their previous antics. It starts out rough, with each side bickering back and forth until Asakusa starts the premiere of the anime. As the projector flickers to life, all of their classmates, teachers, and even the student council are immediately sucked into their world, with Studio Saru showing that complete immersion through the explosions, wind, and even environment affecting everyone but the girls in the real world. Instead, the girls' love for the short can be seen as soon as it ends. While the school is stunned into silence, instead of gloating or being content with what they made, the three immediately start to critique their own work, in a way you can only do with something you truly love and care about. That feeling of passion is present throughout each and every aspect of this show, and that's why it stuck with me for all these years, constantly sitting in the back of my mind whenever I work on something I care about. And that's the whole reason I'm even making this video. In fact, I was working on a completely different project when the show popped into my head and wouldn't leave. I rewatched it and fell in love with the characters and the world all over again, it capturing the near inexplicable euphoria that comes from creating. With all of that being said, I'd really recommend checking out Eizouken for yourself. It's only 12 episodes, and each one is packed with so much fun and style that it makes it a delight to watch. And thank you for watching this far. If you want to see more from me, hit subscribe, and with that being said, see ya. Oh my god, I got the plague from being in this closet too long.